Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about cloud security, which is an area full of challenges, especially as we shift more and more of our workload to the cloud. To discuss that, I'm joined by Ryan Orsi, Worldwide Partner Lead Security at Amazon Web Services. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, James. Really glad to be here.
Has it been a good week, a long week? What's your take here today on Friday?
Fabulous week. Really excited. Lots going on in AWS and security and in the partner network where I sit. More to come. More to
I
come.
bet. I bet. Yeah, it's one thing about AWS. It releases things, a lot of tools, a lot. I've always appreciated that about AWS. It never rests. All right, so I know you've got some interesting, neat news about cloud security. Before we get to that, I'd like to get your sense of the overall cloud security market. It's one thing I find particularly interesting about the cloud security world is that if you go back a few years, or even all the way back to ancient times of 2012 or so, 2014, companies would think, oh, we can't go to the cloud because it's not secure up there. We have to stay with our data center. But I think there's been this evolving thinking, and people realize in many ways the cloud is actually more secure than their data center, because you wouldn't hear a lot about the cloud being breached. We do hear about data centers being breached. So given that, or given any take you want to take in terms of cloud security this year, what's moving the market? What's big this year?
Sure, James. And in my position where I sit at AWS, I've got a view from our AWS partner network community of those system integrators, MSP, managed service providers, and even our MSSPs, those are managed security service providers.
Right.
And they are frontline helping our mutual customers out there that are adopting AWS. And we hear a lot of signal. You might have gotten the news that Amazon and AWS are fairly known for being customer obsessed and listening to those customer use cases. And I'd say one consistent theme this year, and I think it's been going on for a little while, but we are hearing requests from customers, both to our partners and to AWS ourselves, for some assistance in really understanding if they're extracting all of the business value out of the security tools that they've invested in. Those can be native security tools like AWS Inspector, AWS Security Hub, GuardDuty. They can be third-party tools. And there's some questions still out there in the community of, is everything configured properly? And what is where do I find that proper configuration? Are these security tools that are protecting against network threats? Are they reporting those events into my central logging reporting system for analysts to be able to view everything? So there's some general questions out there, depending on environment, right? It kind of ranges from the larger enterprise environments, maybe with more adequately staffed internal security teams, slightly different needs from those folks, to the more newer startup companies that are sort of born in the cloud, if you will. But the general question remains of, are they extracting all the value that they can get from the tools they have, both cloud native and third party?
And what advice do you give those companies if they're concerned about configuration or extracting all the possible value? What's your advice for handling that challenge?
You don't have to go at it alone. There is a very vibrant community of companies where cloud security, AWS security is their full-time day job, and sometimes night job. But it is their full-time job. And that's really what my team and all of us at AWS and the partner network related to security are all about, is aligning these excellent, talented folks inside of their companies to be able to message to the mutual customers of ours that if they need maybe a 1-week workshop just to really sit down and get a lay of the landscape of all the assets, cloud or even not cloud assets that are out there, security tools from SIEM products, endpoint products, network products, just get a nice inventory of everything, pull configurations, and check out what products integrate with what log sources and data sources, and just get a nice sort of handle on state of the business of the security estate today. And there's of course a great roadmap to improve that. So many of our partners that we work with are able to provide that kind of an assessment and a consulting service. It's really valuable for those that are sort of wondering, am I getting all the value out of what I've invested in?
Okay. Well, let's take a look at you've got some interesting news. Looks like there's 3 news items here. I'll read them and I'll let you comment on them. This first one is AWS is launching a web-based dashboard that will help customers streamline the software as a service product risk assessment process. What's the details there?
Sure, yeah, James. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a company acquiring a piece of software off of the AWS marketplace,
Mhm.
if that company needs to show proof of different governance, risk, and compliance requirements of that piece of software to other regulatory bodies, that historically has been somewhat of a laborious process where the customer who bought the software needs to contact the software vendor for things like proof of data sovereignty within certain countries,
Mhm.
proof of data protection where data is secured in certain ways and encrypted at rest and in transit, application security attestation to different regulatory standards. So there's historically been some significant back and forth processes of customer who obtained software reaching back out to the software provider for different documentations. So with the marketplace vendor insights dashboard, this is really making it much simpler for both that customer who needs to show proof that that software they purchased meets various regulatory standards, making that process much simpler for them, and also for the software vendor who's listing on AWS Marketplace. And this dashboard is sort of that in between centralized place where the software vendors can pre-populate a lot of the commonly requested pieces of documentation, like that I just mentioned, data protection, data sovereignty, proof of attestation from other regulatory compliance requirements. And the customers can go to the exact same portal, the same dashboard, and self-serve. So they don't have to send an email request or a chat and wait for a response. They can just immediately gather that. And it takes that time of sometimes months back and forth down to just a few hours, and a customer can get exactly what they need to have their applications certified.
Okay. Item number two here, AWS is relaunching its security competency for members of the AWS Partner Network to include 8 additional competency categories. What's up there?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said the word relaunch. So the AWS Security Competency, it's a partner program, and it exists to really host a community of expert companies around the world that are experts at creating security software that runs and protects resources in AWS, and also those companies that are experts at providing deployment services, implementation services, training services around those software packages, and also even just more generically around AWS environments. And the reason why this is being relaunched and really redesigned is, well, again, I'll go back to my previous comment that we have a bit of a reputation for being quite customer obsessed, and we have a lot of customer signal coming into the team that designs these programs. What we've been hearing is there's been a great amount of success with the existing security competency and the partners inside. Customers are also looking for even more. So with these 8 categories, the categories sort of loosely represent the common security needs of a customer at various points in their security journey in AWS.
Mhm.
So just to give you an example, like one category is threat detection and response. And
Right.
some of the very specific use cases covered in that category where a partner would apply for that category is around security information and event monitoring, or SIM, security orchestration, automation, and response, or SOAR,
Mhm.
network detection and response, endpoint detection and response. So these are common use cases that arise for different organizations, but they arise at very specific points along their cloud journey. So the security competency was redesigned, aligning to these very specific challenges customers are having, and we're providing basically sort of a one-stop shop experience for them to find the exact software that they might need for that particular use case,
Mhm.
and accompanying professional or consulting services if they would like some additional help to deploy that software.
Okay. All right. The third and final news item is AWS is launching a new competency, the AWS Level 1 Managed Security Service Provider Competency. Sure, there's a demand for that. What's the details there?
This is a really exciting one, and very unique for the industry too. So it actually, the level 1 MSSP competency initially introduced to the world in 2021 in August at last year's AWS Reinforce conference. And for the very first time, proud to say it, AWS took a stance and we defined the minimum areas of an AWS environment that any customer should have monitored around the clock, 24/7, for security threats, and have that staffed with folks that are able to respond to those security threats. So that was known as the level 1 managed security service baseline.
Okay.
It's been a great success from last August until now, and we picked up demand for even more. So those 10 fundamental areas, we picked up a lot more from the customer community where they'd like to see additional protection and monitoring services around things like modern compute. So that's one of these we're launching 6 new specializations with this level 1 MSSP competency. And modern compute is all about having MSSP professionals around the clock monitoring containerized workloads and serverless functions, which don't have a server to run on, of course.
Right.
Then monitor them for those very specific and unique cyber security events. And they're able to respond to those with defined playbooks and runbooks. And everything I'm talking about, those use cases were defined by AWS security experts with a lot of experience dealing with these issues firsthand. And every partner that's being announced here, these three announcements rather, have been validated against a very rigorous quality standard. And that means technical requirements, demonstrations with AWS auditors. And so the customers can rest assured that when they're getting a service from a level 1 MSSP competency partner around modern compute, they're getting a service that AWS has also helped define for those very specific customer needs.
Okay, makes perfect sense. All right, I'm sure they'll be interested in those 3 news items. I'd like to zoom up a bit and get your view of the future of cloud security. You're obviously very close to it. You're right there working in the trenches. What if we look a few years ahead, middle of the decade or so? What is cloud security going to look like then? Do you expect it to improve, or will it always remain really challenging as it is now?
I won't say there's never a silver bullet. There's never 100% anything in the world of security, but it will be easier, and it's going to continue to get easier. We really believe with these two programs, the security and level 1 MSSP competency programs, we're making AWS probably the easiest place to go for security in terms of a security practitioner deploying and turning things on and having some assurance that what they're turning on is being configured to best practice. Best practice kind of evolves, right? And that's maybe one thing I would say for the future is I think best practices are evolving. What we all used to know about role-based access control, or RBAC, kind of the new cycle is attribute-based access control, to be more granular, more refined on what specifically is allowed to access various resources in the cloud and the whole audit trail of security events that goes with it. So I think it's going to get easier. I think partners play a critical role at making that easier for our mutual customers, for the software that they make, the services that they use to deploy these, and even the follow-on managed services that they can do to take care of everything for the customers. And there's going to be evolving best practices. As the cloud expands, the use cases expands, it's really the world's greatest source of innovation in technology right now. That opens up additional security events, additional security behaviors to be monitored for. That's where we're going to continue our roadmap in the partner organization of getting our partner communities, the security and level 1 MSSP partner communities, really in the front driver's seat ahead of those different trends as best practices evolve.
Well, one last question about the future. You think zero trust will become even more dominant than it is? I mean, will zero trust be pretty much the default deployment in the years ahead?
I hope it is. I really do. And I do actually see that in listening to some of our large system integrator partners around the world and the various enterprises and mid-enterprises they work with. Zero trust is already, it's not just been a popular topic, it's been a popular projects that are in deployment right now and also being successfully delivered. And it also is a bit of a journey as well. Zero trust doesn't happen overnight, but the various tools and processes in place around the world from these different organizations that really specialize in it, they're helping our customers, our mutual customers, get to a zero trust standpoint quicker than maybe they would on their own. That's just from having resources that, again, being their 100% day job is this kind of a deployment. I think leveraging a third party can really help expedite that journey to zero trust.
Interesting. Ryan, I think you said it, a lot of good stuff. It's going to be a cool sector to watch. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, James.